I think that takes away from what motorcycling really is, because when I look back at it and I think about my fondest memories, what made motorcycling great for me, it wasn't the motorcycles. They had nothing to do with it. It was about a journey that I took, that I remember, that involved motorcycles. And in the journey, there were all these different phases that were part of my life. And I kind of want to drill into that in this video and talk about, why having the right bike isn't necessarily something that you want to prioritize when you're riding motorcycles. Let's get into that. Welcome back. In today's video, I want to talk about a subject that I've been meaning to sort of focus in on, but I just haven't done yet. And the reason I'm doing this now is because the other day I was talking to someone that I haven't seen in a very long time. We were friends back in the day, and we haven't really kept up. And we were talking about, our lives and what we're doing now. And the subject of motorcycling came up. And when he finally asked me about what I'm doing, what I'm riding and everything, I told him, what I'm riding. And he looked at me, he kind of had he was a little shocked, I guess, because and he looks at it and he says, shouldn't you be riding something like, like an ADV, an adventure bike, or maybe a sport tour or something like that? And I said, well, maybe. I said, but when I listen to other people our age, a lot of them tell me I shouldn't even be riding a motorcycle at all. So, and we kind of laughed about that. But as I got to thinking about that, that's something that is prevalent in motorcycling, and it probably has been something that has gotten more dominant, now that we have social media and a lot of that stuff. And there's a lot of influence that comes. I think when we're young, the influence is kind of peer pressure. We want to be like our peers. But as we get older, the pressure comes as sort of a status thing. I think a lot of people ride bikes because they feel like there's a status to this bike or a status to that bike. Now, as I said before, I feel fortunate to have gotten into motorcycles early and a long time ago. We didn't have really powerful bikes. We didn't have a lot of the things that are available today. And so choices were limited, and there was less emphasis on types of bikes. I mean, just having any bike, as I remember, any bike that had a motor that would travel was perfect for me for my first bike. I didn't want it too big, but like I said, we didn't have that to worry about. And I think this first phase, in my memory of it, it was such a fantastic phase, and I call it the introduction and discovery phase. It's, it started with seeing motorcycles on TV or on the street. I've talked about Evel Knievel being just, a kind of a mentor, it was larger than life superhero type thing that drew me in. That was what drew me in. My brother having a bike, those were the two big things. And that phase was the discovery and exploration phase, And when I got my first motorcycle and started to learn, that began that second phase of learning to ride. And that went on for years. And in some ways, that phase continues, I think, for the rest of your life. But then we kind of go into our third and fourth phase, which is expanding your horizons. And in that phase, you could possibly switch. I think a lot of people, that expanding your horizon phase happens in about 6 months to a year, and you're starting to ride the bike, and you've got it under control, and you start thinking about your next bike. And in that, I think it's best not to have any preconceived notions of what bike is right, rather than figuring out what you want to do. Because as I look back, I think if someone had said, "Oh, you've got, right on the road, you've got to have this bike with, this gear, this helmet, this, and this," I don't know that I would have had as much fun. I think it would have been harder. I think trying to live up to someone else's standard probably would have tamped down the enthusiasm that I had for riding. And, looking back, like I said, it's just those memories are really about places I was, the growth of me as a rider, the growth of me as a person. And that's what I've taken away from all my years of riding, is that it's not, specifically about one particular bike or one type of bike that made me a happy motorcyclist. And because I've had so many different kinds of bikes that, there was really no thought about that. And, when you're in these phases, you'll go into a place where you start to find yourself. And I call this the getting into your groove phase. And that's a long-lasting phase. And, for me, street riding kind of took over. I still miss dirt riding, and I might have a new discovery phase later on in life and go right back to where I was. But I'm not going to take any preconceived notions. I mean, if I were to get another dirt bike, there is no way I'm going to go and spend, $10, $15, $20,000 on the best, adventure bike that everyone is raving about. I don't care what it is. If I'm going to go back in the woods, my experience tells me that I'm probably going to drop that bike a few times and probably want to have something a lot smaller in cc's. I know that I'm not going to be the kind of rider that I was. I don't hope to be. There's nothing there. And going with my previous videos, finding myself, I know that if I went back into the woods, it would be more of a relaxed pace. I still love to push myself every now and then, but if I went back into the woods, I would go back with no preconceived notions about what the right bike is. I think I would start from scratch and, again, prioritize the kind of riding that I want to do and the environment that bike would be in. Like here in Florida, I wouldn't have a bunch of hills. I don't need a very high-powered bike, something fairly simple. But those are the kind of things that I think about. The other thing was, you go through the discovery phase, the learning to ride phase, the expand your horizon phase, get your groove phase, and then there's a trial phase. And the trial phase can be anything. For me, it was my first serious wreck. And then all the doubt creeps in and you begin to question everything. And of course, you can surround yourself with enough people that'll convince you that you're on the right track, thinking about not going back. Again, fortunately, I was young enough that I wasn't quite done yet, and got back on the horse. And so we go right back to those early phases, and we start thinking about, okay, let's do this a little better this time. Let's cut out some of the stuff that led us into that first wreck. And so you start building on your experience and you start building that new phase. And I think that's the best part about motorcycling. And I would hate to think that having the right bike was a priority that I needed to fulfill before riding. I see a lot of people, and let's just say it. I mean, there's a lot of people who the motorcycle lifestyle involves a lot of socializing. It involves other people. It involves a lot of things, and that's fine. It's, but I know that's not for me. And had I gotten into that, And I did to some extent. I did find, you know, riding with groups of people at times, it was sort of enjoyable. But larger groups became troublesome later on. But I'm just glad I don't have that kind of mindset to think that I have to be on the right bike. As I think back to all my time riding motorcycles, I can honestly say that it was the memories of the experience more than it was the motorcycle. And of course, I've had favorite motorcycles. I've had motorcycles I wish I could have back. That doesn't mean I think they're the right and the only motorcycle for me, and certainly not for anyone else. And I don't think I could tell anyone what the right bike is for them. And the flip side of that coin is I don't think anyone can tell you what the right bike is for you. You just got to go out there and find it, and hopefully you will. By not focusing on having the right type of bike, you might find that your experience is much broader and more enjoyable in the end. But anyway, that's all I have for this video. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Thank you for subscribing. For all of you that have done that, I really appreciate it. I can't thank you enough. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them down below. I'd love to hear from you. I read every comment, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks. Take care.